Now let's bring on the Mountaineers. Goes around about the 50, the 10 to 5. A touchdown with Virginia. He did it. He did it. That's with Dwight. Beavers and he's gone. Touchdown. Tavon Austin. As the hills of West Virginia resound with the sounds of Golden Blue football.
They want to have a 7-on-7 drill. We want to make it a fist fight. Nothing cheap, nothing dirty, but West Virginia football.
From the heart, streaming, it's Mountaineer pride. Leave no doubt tonight. No doubt. They shouldn't have played the old Golden Blue.
West Virginia is a special place. People are the state that have great pride in this WV logo.
Ain't no stopping the Golden Blue.
It is a great night to be a Mountaineer wherever you may be.
What's going on, Mountaineer Nation? Welcome into another live stream here on the Country Roads webcast channel. November 13th edition here for our weekly snap count stream. We do this every week following the West Virginia football games, usually here on Monday. And I hope everyone's having a good Monday, having a good start to your week here if you're tuned in here live. Appreciate you being in here live with us. If you haven't checked out one of these snap count streams, what we'll do here basically is I'll discuss the injury updates provided by Neil Brown today. I'll go over the snap counts from the previous game, that one being this one against Oklahoma, of course. And then using those two things and a little bit of guesswork, we'll project out a depth chart for the Mountaineers for this upcoming week. And also on tonight's stream, I'm going to throw in the player grades as well. You guys may know I do a player grades video series here on the channel detailing the top 5 highest player grades on both offense and defense according to PFF for West Virginia each week. Haven't got a chance to put that video out yet this week, so we're going to just factor it in here to the snap count stream and touch on it here as well to throw in with what we usually do here, that of course being the snap counts, the injury updates, and the depth chart projection. And we'll get to all of that momentarily. And of course, as we do all of that, I encourage you guys that are in here live, drop your questions, comments, concerns, anything you want to talk about there in the chat. We'll touch on it throughout the stream as well. Lead it off with the injury update here. Let me pull up this article from our friends over at wesportsnow.com, and we'll lead off with our injury update for this week. All right. Injury update. Really, the only two players that we were kind of provided a bit of an update on, of course, were the two that we're probably most concerned about. Those being Doug Nestor, who we saw, return to the lineup, but then have to leave the game for the Mountaineers along the offensive line. Seems like we just can't get healthy, be at full strength along that offensive line and be all together for a complete game. Hasn't happened since earlier this year. It looked like this would finally be the game that we got everyone together. But instead, Nestor, I don't know if he re-aggravated the injury or what, but was not able to, continue on in the contest. And, of course, we all saw the issue there with C.J. Donaldson. Looked like an ankle again. The update that Neil Brown provided today, though, pretty much was that they decided to go ahead and practice Sunday. They wanted to get the bad taste of that loss out of their mouth, but neither Doug Nestor or C.J. Donaldson participated in that practice. And he just said he'll know more about their status later in the week. And so he's going to update that on his Thursday radio show with Tony Caridi that he always does. And that's when we'll know more about their status. Personally, I think Doug Nestor maybe, but CJ Donaldson, just judging by how it looked, I would not expect him to be able to come back that quickly from, an ankle injury like that. I don't think he'll play in this game. Best case scenario, maybe he plays against Baylor. Like I said, that's just my personal opinion, but he could surprise. Maybe it's not as bad as it looked there, and hopefully it's not. Would love to see CJ bounce back and play this weekend and have a good game against Cincinnati in the final home game for the Mountaineers. But pretty brief injury update this week, but that's all we got there on that front. Wanted to lead off with that, get that out of the way. So we knocked one thing off the list already. Continue to encourage you guys, drop your questions, comments, concerns there in the chat as I continue throughout here. Like I said, haven't got a chance to do the player grades video, so I'm going to go ahead and factor that in here now before we get to the snap counts from the game against Oklahoma and then get to our depth chart projection for the upcoming week for West Virginia. So let's take a look at the top 5 highest graded players, both on offense and defense for the Mountaineers in Game 10 of the 2023 WVU football season. But before I get into this, just wanted to give you guys a quick reminder, if you would, hit that like button, give us a thumbs up on this video. It really helps not only its performance, but future videos performances here on the channel as well. And if you're a West Virginia fan, Big 12 fan, college football fan, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Helps us, helps you, helps get more of this Mountaineer sports content out to Mountaineer Nation. Having said that, let's get into it here. Leading it off with the defensive side, and of course, I know terrible game for the West Virginia defense. Obviously, we all saw that, firsthand against the Sooners. Probably the worst of the season for sure, I would say, in my opinion, but still got to continue to feature here and talk about these defensive player grades. But I think you'll see as we go through them, something will stand out. I'll talk about it as we wrap them up here on the defensive side, but let's run through these really quickly. We'll try and keep it brief here on the player grades. Know everyone's ready to get this Oklahoma game kind of done and over with. So leading it off at number 5, Jalen Thornton here, and that's the defensive lineman, of course, the legacy player, son of the great John Thornton, one of the all-time greats here at West Virginia. He comes out with the 72.0 defensive grade against the Sooners, and he has really looked good the past couple of weeks. Actually, he's been a bright spot on that defensive line, got a sack in the game there on Dylan Gabriel against the Sooners, and I thought he's performed well now 2 weeks in a row, and glad to see him really starting to come on now here in his Mountaineer career. And then at number 4, we get Hershey McLaurin, who we're glad to see him work his way back from that injury he suffered a few games ago. Him and Marcus Floyd continue to kind of split action there at that spear position, but Hershey McLaurin has looked good when he's been healthy, and glad to see him getting back to being more of his healthy self. Talk about it more in snap counts here momentarily. You'll see him getting close to overtaking the snap counts there at the spear position yet again, and I think he may do that over these final 2 games. And he's performed well for the most part this season. Does it yet again, 4th highest grade of Mountaineer on defense against the Sooners with the 72.4 grade. Then at number 3, we get Hammond Russell, the West Virginia defensive lineman, coming out with a 78.5 grade, coming from the nose tackle position. So, as bad as West Virginia was dominated in the trenches in this game, I was surprised to see, so many defensive linemen pop up on the player grades here for the Mountaineers. And we get another one here as the 2nd highest graded defensive player for West Virginia in this game. And that, of course, was Tomi Durajaye, coming out with the 83.3 grade. And he's a guy that's really got just a ton of potential. We've seen him have a great season right now, and he's only a redshirt freshman playing in a reserve role. So just a tip of the iceberg of what type of player I think that he can be. And looking down the line here at West Virginia's defense, I think next season he's really going to be a force. And then the top player grade for West Virginia, definitely making his first appearance here this season, I think on the top 5 in general, but certainly his first appearance as the number 1 highest graded player on defense. And how about Caden Bizer, recently earning a scholarship here prior to the season's beginning, and here he is coming out as the highest graded Mountaineer on defense here in November, 83.5 grade, just edging out Tomi Durajaye to be the highest graded Mountaineer on defense. And of course, the thing that I wanted to talk about with the defense that I said I would say before we wrapped up on that side of the ball, and I'm sure some of you may have picked up on, and it kind of leads to, the performance that West Virginia had in that game, and how we all know how negative it was. And that is the fact that all of these players, pretty much save for Hershey McLaurin, who you can say has been a starter this season, but he's still working his way back from injury. All of the top 5 grades are players that are backups for the Mountaineers. So that just shows how bad your starting defense performed in this game. All of the reserve players outperforming them according to PFF grades there on the defensive side. So there's a look at the defensive side for the Mountaineers. Let's flip it over and talk a little bit about the offensive player grades. But before we do that, I'm going to take a swig of my coffee momentarily, and then we'll hit the top 5 offensive player grades for the Mountaineers in the game against the Sooners. All right, moving on here to the offensive side. Top 5 highest graded players on offense according to PFF in Game 10 for the Mountaineers, leading it off at number 5 with Hudson Clement. Glad to see him make his return from injury. I mentioned it in our review podcast. I don't think he's 100% quite yet, but West Virginia used him in a couple critical spots on that late drive there to end the first half when they got some points there right before halftime, and he caught a crucial pass to convert a third down for West Virginia, and then nearly caught a pass in the end zone that, of course, led to West Virginia's touchdown after the pass interference that was called. And he comes out with a 65.5 grade, and hopefully he's going to be 100% come this weekend, and if so, he can make some plays. Let's not forget, before his injury, he was leading the nation in yards per reception. He's been very impressive here in his redshirt freshman season, and that's the thing I keep trying to hammer home about this West Virginia offense. They played good in the 4 games prior to, this Oklahoma game, and they didn't necessarily play bad. They, you look at the numbers, they still did some good things statistically. Obviously, they really cost themselves with the 5 straight 3-and-outs they had in this game. But when you look at West Virginia's offense and a lot of the players that have been performing well, it's been a lot of underclassmen, so that bodes well for the future. Hudson Clement is certainly one of those with a bright future, coming out as the 5th highest graded Mountaineer on offense with the 65.5 grade. And then we're speaking of another freshman here for the Mountaineers, and this one is a true freshman, and this guy right here I think has an extremely high ceiling, and that is Traylon Ray. He comes out as the 4th highest graded Mountaineer with the 67.3 offensive grade in this one. And you've heard people talk about him potentially being a spectacular player throughout his career, I think is the term that Chad Scott used in his press conference today, and you've seen shades of it throughout this season. He's really starting to get it, I think, and maybe we'll see him make some big plays even over this next couple of games. But I really like the performance he put on against the Sooners, and he nearly had a very nice touchdown grab as well. Was just centimeters away from getting his feet in there as he had his toe out of bounds. But I like what I've seen from Traylon Ray this year, and like I said, another guy that just gets you excited for the future as he's a true freshman out there making plays. And then at number 3, we talked about him a little bit earlier during the injury update. We've got C.J. Donaldson, 69.6 offensive grade for the Mountaineers, over 75 yards rushing on only 14 carries, got into the end zone again. Now we're just hoping that he's healthy and can get healthy, rather, after he went down and didn't finish out this game. And you hate to see what looked like another ankle injury for C.J., what could possibly be the 2nd consecutive one, and hopefully this one doesn't knock him out for the remainder of this year like it did last season. Hopefully we'll get a more positive update this year than we did last year on him when Neil Brown provides that update on his Thursday radio show. But C.J. Donaldson, one of the few West Virginia players that had a nice grade in this game against Oklahoma, coming out with the 69.6. And then here at number 2, I think maybe the most surprising one, and that is Garrett Green, coming out as the 2nd highest graded player on offense for the Mountaineers against the Sooners. He really, I think, had his worst game of the season, and I think a lot of people would probably agree with that. Maybe even Garrett Green himself. The coaching staff certainly thought that his performance left a lot to be desired. And I guess, if you're looking for a silver lining with that, though, the fact that GG's worst game of the season still has him in your top 5 player grades, and not only in there, but in your top 2 in terms of, player grades on the offensive side. So had that going for us, I guess. Didn't have very much going for us on Saturday night. But speaking of something that's been going good for us, that's the performance of Devin Carter. Really, since the coaching staff moved him into the slot, a few weeks ago, his performances have been a lot better since that happened. And that continued in this one also. Had another nice game. A 76.8 grade, by far the highest grade of Mountaineer on offense. He's been a nice pickup in the transfer portal for West Virginia, leading the Mountaineers in receiving at this point in the season. They're going to need him to continue to make plays if they're going to want to win these final 2 games and hopefully get back to onto the winning side of things following, this painful gut punch of a loss to the Sooners, but glad to see Devin Carter have a good performance as PFF grades him out as the top highest graded Mountaineer on the offensive side. So there you have it in terms of the offensive player grades and defensive player grades for the Mountaineers against the Sooners. According to PFF, no, it was a painful loss, but still wanted to, continue the series there, and hopefully West Virginia has, more positive results overall in the win-loss column side of things, and that will probably result into some better player grades, and hopefully, especially on the defensive side, we'll get to see some of the starters in the top 5 defensive player grades when we're back doing this video again next week following the game against Cincinnati. But that's what the Mountaineers had in Week 10 of the season here following the 59-20 loss to the Oklahoma Sooners. So I wanted to throw the player grades in here to the live stream for sure. Appreciate everyone that's hopped in here live in the meantime as I've gone through those player grades. I want to encourage you guys continue to drop your questions, comments, concerns in the chat. They're going to touch on some of those now. I'm taking a swig of my coffee real quick, and I'll catch up on some of your all's comments before we get into the snap counts from the game against Oklahoma. And then, of course, using the injury update from earlier, the snap count information, and a little bit of guesstimation, project out a depth chart for the Mountaineers, a little bit of a look at what the 2 deep could look like, for the game against Cincinnati. Hey, John. Hey, Kenny. See y'all in there. Appreciate y'all being here, tuning in and chiming in. John says he thinks we still have a decent year if we finish 8-4. I'm feeling the same way, John. That's something I put out, on social media. I personally, a lot of people are trying to quantify it. Well, we didn't play these teams. We didn't play those teams. And I think that that's so asinine myself personally, because, if we finish 5-7, you don't say, hey, if we didn't play these 2 teams, we played these 2 teams, we could have been, 6-6 or something. You don't do that when you have a losing season. So why, when you have a winning season, would you try and quantify it any other way? To me, if you win 8 games, that's something you haven't done in 5-6 years. So that's a positive automatically right there for me. If you win 8 games this season, and also I predicted 8-4, so literally if they meet my expectations that I had going into the season, I won't be too upset personally. I know I'm kind of in the minority on that. A lot of fans are not feeling that way, but I'll never not feel that way, especially when we haven't had a lot of success in the Neil Brown era. He hasn't won more than 6 games. It's been 5 or 6 wins. We need to, I said I wanted to at least see him win 7. And if he goes and wins 8, that's awesome. And if he wins a bowl game and wins 9, then that's really impressive, because there's not been very many 9-win seasons when you go look at the history of West Virginia football, 9, 10-win seasons. That's when you're getting into, kind of rarefied territory. West Virginia hasn't done that a ton. 9-win seasons are a lot more common than, the 10 wins, and definitely a lot more common than the 11 wins. But still, not a ton of times has that been done. So if we win 8 games and then win a bowl game to get to 9, I'm extremely satisfied personally. I agree with you there, John. I'd consider it a very successful season. He says, turns out the TCU and Texas Tech wins are pretty good. Yeah, especially Texas Tech after what they did to Kansas. Did not see that one coming at all. Silas, good to see you as well, man. Good to see you. I appreciate you guys being in here and tuning in and chiming in that are in here. If you're hopping in here now, or if you're watching this on a playback, encourage you, hit that thumbs up button, give us a like. Really helps us a ton. If you're a West Virginia fan, be sure and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you are in here live, drop your thoughts there in the chat. Touch on some more of your all's comments momentarily. Let's get into the snap counts here. We'll lead it off with the snap counts on the offensive side for the Mountaineers in this game against Oklahoma. Pull these up really quickly. And, of course, at the quarterback position, we did see some of the Mountaineers reserves get into the game late there. So you did get 11 snaps for Nico, but Garrett Green with the majority of the snaps there with 65. Then at the running back position, I mentioned the injury to C.J. Donaldson late in the game, which meant Jaheim White kind of finished out the contest more or less until the reserves came in, and then we got some more of Justin Johnson, who we hadn't seen in quite a while. So, it's 37 snaps for CJ, 28 for Jaheim, and 12 for Justin Johnson. And when you look at the status of CJ Donaldson, if he's unable to return, I know they kind of had mentioned that they finally decided to redshirt DJ Oliver because he's at that limit now. If he plays in any more games, he would have to burn his red shirt. But if C.J. Thompson's unable to go, I don't think West Virginia would probably try and rely on just Jaheim White or Justin Johnson. So it would be one of two things that would happen then for the Mountaineers. Either they're changing their mind and they're burning that red shirt on DJ Oliver, or you're putting Jalen Anderson back into the fold if you choose to do that. So I think if, we end up getting a bad report on CJ, Thursday night, knock on wood, hopefully that's not what happens. I think that would be what West Virginia would have to turn to moving forward. But you guys know I have a ton of faith in Jaheim White. That's my guy. No, this game he kind of got bottled up a little bit, but let's be honest, the Oklahoma defensive line just did a phenomenal job. It wasn't really his fault. The offensive line left a lot to be desired in this game for West Virginia, unfortunately, but wanted to mention that as we got to the running back snap counts there. Moving on to the wide receivers, Devin Carter leads the way with 59 snaps. Obviously, had a good game as we've seen showing up there, going through the player grades. 50 snaps for Traylon Ray. Mentioned him continuing to come on. I think he's just going to get better and better. He had that injury earlier in the season, or I think he'd be even further along than what he is right now. But just imagine how good he's going to be after a full off season as well. Then Preston Fox with 46 snaps. He's really done some good things the past couple of weeks for West Virginia. E.J. Horton, 25 snaps, and I don't know if it was him feeling a little bit threatened by the return of Hudson Clement. I don't want to speculate too much on why, but probably, his most down performance of the season as well. That's one thing I talked about in our review podcast was, unfortunately for West Virginia, was everything that could go wrong did go wrong. And not only did everything go wrong, but, a lot of people had their worst games of the season at the worst possible times. E.J. Horton was a victim of some of that at times in this contest. Rodney Gallagher III was surprised to see, the usage of him go down so much after he'd been so involved in recent weeks, but only 13 snaps for him, and talked a little bit about Hudson Clement. They're trying to ease him back into it. Expect him to play a lot more snaps this Saturday, but only plays 13 in this game also. And then at the tight end position, we know it's pretty much been exclusively Cole Taylor and Traylon Davis. Cole Taylor with 60 snaps, Traylon Davis with 30. But interestingly, last week they got Victor Wickstrom some action. This week they get Will Dixon in on 2 snaps. And I think that maybe is something that we're going to see, is then maybe try and get him into the action a little bit. Neil Brown mentioned, this past week that he's the fastest among the tight ends, and they really like his potential for the future as a pass catcher. We know Traylon Davis does some great things blocking, but other than Cole Taylor, they haven't really had another option as a pass catcher at the tight end position. Maybe they're going to try and use Will Dixon as a wrinkle. I know his 2 snaps came obviously late in, the garbage time of this game, but you never know what that could mean. They're obviously trying to get him some experience, so they could try and work him in over these final 2 games. We'll see what happens. As you know, that's one thing to watch now, is we're underneath those 4, final 4 games. So players are going to play that haven't played yet. You'll see some of those pop up here in the snap counts, see some more of those on the defensive side when we get over to that side of the ball. But West Virginia is going to play some of these true freshmen that they can still redshirt now, even if they play them in these final few games. So look out to see some new faces maybe over these final couple games for West Virginia. But rounding out our snap counts on the offensive side with the offensive linemen, 76 snaps for Wyatt Milam, 76 snaps for Thomas Remick, 75 snaps for Brandon Yates. Glad to see that after it looked like he was going to be injured for a little bit in this game. 71 snaps for Zach Frazier. Mentioned the 65 for Doug Nestor as he had to leave the game. That's why his snap count is lower, and hopefully get positive update on his injury status on Thursday as well. 16 snaps for Nick Malone and 6 for Jaquay Hubbard, the reserve offensive lineman that are almost like co-starters for the Mountaineers there along that unit. So those are the snap counts on the offensive side for West Virginia. I'm going to take a swig of my coffee here and catch up on your all's comments before we switch over to the defensive side and update those snap counts as we move on here throughout the stream. Silas says, really hoped for a competitive game Saturday. Pretty disappointing, but need to rebound and win big last 2 games. Yeah, that's the thing now. West Virginia needs to, show one thing that we've seen from them all season is them being resilient. Hopefully they still showcase that resolve and, show that they still have something to play for, something they want to show. They want to be, the most successful team that Neil Brown's had yet at WVU. They still have the potential to be able to do that. And like I said, they could win 9 games, which would be awesome. And it would be a special season for those guys. And I think we need to continue to rally behind them, especially this Saturday. It's senior day. Let's root for this team. And, of course, the final home game there in Morgantown. So get up and get to it if you can do so. I'm going to be in Morgantown this weekend myself. I'll talk a little bit more about that before we, wrap up the stream here. Got a little something I want to plug in regards to that. And, of course, an opportunity for you guys to potentially maybe see me and the wife up there actually as well. Talk about that before we wrap up the stream here. But I thought we'd be competitive as well. If you guys watched the preview podcast, I thought it would be a shootout because I didn't really like the matchup of Oklahoma's passing game against West Virginia's defense, because I likened it back to against Houston when they had so many talented receivers and they could spread us out, and also the quarterback was a threat to run. It really is a mismatch for West Virginia, and I saw that kind of on paper against Oklahoma, and so I was worried about it, but I thought West Virginia's offense had played so well in recent weeks. They would be able to, step up to the plate and match Oklahoma in a shootout type game. Looked like it was going to be that early on, but then West Virginia had that, sequence that I've talked about a lot with the 5 straight 3-and-outs, of course, one of which was a 4-and-out sandwiched in there, but, same thing. And that really kind of killed their chances of making this a shootout, even though they still had some chances later on in the games to, pull back with them. But just too many mistakes, didn't capitalize on their opportunities enough, unfortunately. Silas and, meeting Oklahoma, coming off of 2 straight losses. I talked about, before the game, I was really worried about that and then being pissed off. And unfortunately, all of those things came to fruition, and it was just every possible thing that could go wrong for West Virginia did at the worst possible time in a game where you really needed a big win. But it's okay. Oklahoma's going to beat a lot of teams this season. We've already seen that with their record as it is now. And when they play that well as they did, they're very, very tough to handle. The most disappointing part of it for me was just the play in the trenches from West Virginia, and that's what they got to get corrected. And I'm going to be watching over those final 2 games, Silas, and I think West Virginia will do a better job in the trenches, hopefully. But they're going to be tested against Cincinnati. Make no mistake about it. They have a really huge nose tackle that's been very good for them throughout this season. And their defensive line has been very good at times this season against the run even. So West Virginia, didn't have a great performance against the run, probably the offensive line's worst performance of the season. They're going to want to bounce back, but it's not going to be easy for them to do so going up against Cincinnati either. See if we got any other comments in here now. Kenny says he's seeing maybe Gator Bowl. John Kelly says he'd love to play in Charlotte or the Gator Bowl. You need to take a look at some bowl projections. Maybe I'll try and do a video on that here at some point before the season's up, try and track West Virginia's bowl projections where we may end up. I wouldn't mind it being in Charlotte either. I don't know if the Big 12 has any ties to any bowl games in Charlotte anymore, though. I'd have to look it up to see. That'd be nice. That'd be within driving distance for a lot of Mountaineer fans, myself included. Plus I'm a Panthers fan, so I don't ever mind going to Charlotte personally. That'd be nice. But yes, I see people talking about the Car Care Bowl. Silas talking about it. Yeah, I attended that one as well. That was a fun one, man. Pat White's final game, what was it, 331 passing yards or 332 passing yards, and Hakeem Nicks going off for UNC as well. That was a really fun game. And was it Yates was the quarterback for UNC also. That was a really fun one, man. It really was. Yeah, I'd like to see us be back in Charlotte again. That'd be fun. But appreciate you guys tuning in and chiming in. Encourage everyone else that's in here, drop any thoughts you got there in the chat as well. Questions, comments, concerns. Touch on those here again momentarily. Going to flip over to the other side. Let's discuss the defensive snap counts from this game against Oklahoma. And then, of course, we'll get to our depth chart projection for the week before we wrap things up here as well. All right, flipping it over to the defensive side. The defensive line, you get 40 snaps from Steady Eddie, as I like to call him here, old Edward Vesterinen. 36 from Sean Martin. Did get a sack in the game. Glad to see him get in the backfield and get a sack, from the same high school as me, Bluefield High School. 33 snaps, for Mike Lockhart. It would be nice if he had 33 sacks, wouldn't it? 27 snaps for Tommy Durajaye. 26 snaps for Jalen Thornton. Talked about him in the player grades and had, another good game for the second consecutive week, and he got a sack of his own. And I believe he had 2 TFLs as well. Made an appearance on the Neil Brown press conference show today. Was interviewed as well. I think it's up on YouTube. So, really coming on in recent weeks. And for Torma Mulba, 25 snaps. He's been good here for the Mountaineers this season. 18 snaps for Hammond Russell, also at the nose tackle position. 16 snaps for Day Hawkins and 14 snaps for Asani Redwood. Similar snap counts for those bottom few guys. They're all right around that range, and it just interchanges who's the leader there And then moving on to the Bandits, where, of course, it's been pretty much Bartlett and Bradley exclusively. 51 snaps for Bartlett, 28 for Bradley, and then you do get 2 snaps for Torres Simmons late in the game. The linebackers, they've tried to get Caden Bizer and Tyreek Austin Cave some snaps the past couple of weeks to try and get some rest for Lee Koba and Ben Cutter. Continued that trend in this game. 10 snaps for Austin Cave, 17 for Caden Bizer. Then you get 60 snaps for Ben Cutter and 69 for Lee Koba. Then moving on to the Spear, where I talked a little bit about it earlier, Hershey McLaurin still coming back from his injury. So you get Marcus Floyd, kind of playing there some in that nickel position that they've been using him at throughout this season. They're kind of splitting reps right there now, but Hershey McLaurin getting back to close to overtaking that snap count there, and we'll probably see more of him over these final 2 contests. But for now, against Oklahoma, we saw Marcus Floyd get 39 snaps, playing, of course, a mixture of that nickel spot and the deep safety positions for West Virginia, and then 37 for Hershey McLaurin, and then you get 5 snaps for Raleigh Collins late in the game. The West Virginia corners, it's been pretty much exclusively Beanie Bishop and Malachi Ruffin, with Jacoby Spells being the reserve guy throughout the most of this season since the early portion when Wilson Lamp was benched. This was the first time we've seen Wilson Lamp in quite some time, but he does get 5 snaps there. Beanie Bishop leads the way, 74 snaps, the most snaps played on defense, and he's been arguably West Virginia's best player on the defensive side this season. He was named a Chuck Bednarik Award semifinalist today, leads the nation in pass breakups, leads the nation in passes defended, and he's doing that while playing a ton of snaps because West Virginia doesn't have hardly any depth in the secondary. 74 in this game to lead the Mountaineers. And then 67 for Malachi Ruffin, and, of course, Jacoby Spells continuing to be the reserve for West Virginia, played 20 snaps in this game. And then at the safety position, you get 71 from Aubrey Burks, 69 from Anthony Wilson, who have pretty much been, the guys that have played there mainly the whole time for West Virginia. But you do get a handful of snaps from Avery Wilcox, the walk-on that's played a few games this season, had an interception earlier in the year. And then Josiah Jackson, one of the Jackson twins, true freshmen for West Virginia. I mentioned, you might see some true freshmen pop up here in these late games as West Virginia can play them and still preserve their red shirts. And here you see one of them popping up for West Virginia against Oklahoma as Josiah Jackson has 5 snaps. So that'll round out the snap counts here for this game against Oklahoma. I'll scroll back through them here to give you guys a chance to look at them briefly before we wrap up. And now get set to move on to the depth chart projection portion of the stream here. Always one of my favorite parts, especially considering the fact that WVU hasn't really been putting out a ton of depth charts this season. I've tried to, of course, track it here on the Country Roads webcast, something I always track myself anyway, but been decided to share them in these weekly streams this year and try and formulate a 2 deep and project it out for West Virginia for the coming week, using, of course, injury updates from the previous game, snap counts, and a little bit of guesswork. So we'll get to that depth chart projection here momentarily, but before we do, catch up on some comments. Appreciate that, Kenny. Appreciate you being here, man. Always appreciate you. John Kelly says, will be a great honor for Coach Nealon Saturday. Indeed it will, man. Glad to see that he will be, inducted into, I guess, the Hall of Fame, Ring of Honor. Don't really know what they're calling that necessarily because it's not, a jersey retirement. Obviously, you can't retire a coach's jersey, but essentially the same honor as a jersey retirement, but for a coach, and well-deserved for Don Nealon, list of accomplishments you can run down. I'll probably share that again on the podcast this week. I shared it when they initially announced it, and maybe on the later stream, our prediction stream, which is going to be Thursday night this week, guys, by the way, just for a little heads up on that. Of course, I'll announce the time later this week on our social media, which follow us on X at WVU Country Roads Webcast on Facebook and Instagram. But yeah, definitely going to be a great honor for him. Like I said, long list of accomplishments. To me, the most impressive will always be 2 undefeated seasons at West Virginia, especially with how low the program was when he first came in. So a well-deserved honor for Coach Nealon for sure. John Kelly, glad you brought that up for sure. Kenny Evans says he really worries about the Cincy game. I don't blame you, Kenny. Don't blame me at all, man. I talked about it a little bit earlier, but the thing that worries me about it is just because how West Virginia performed in the trenches against Oklahoma. And, Cincinnati has a really strong defensive line and has been good at run defense at times this season. So it worries me a little bit myself. But the thing that, gives me a silver lining is the fact that West Virginia was just dominated in the trenches. So they have every right to come out, pissed off and hungry the way that Oklahoma did against them. They should do that against Cincinnati. It's also going to be senior day, honoring Coach Neyland. So should have plenty of reasons to get up for this game, despite the fact that it's going to be a challenge, maybe more so than some people expect, I think, Kenny. But appreciate that comment, man. WV Fan 23 says, thanks, we need to get rid of the all-white uniforms. The only game I remember us winning in those uniforms was at TCU a couple years ago. Yep. Thought that when they broke them out, didn't want to, come out and say it because I'm superstitious, but, I've never really been a big fan of the, stormtrooper look, as everyone calls it. Not my personal favorite. You guys know that I love the gold, but also we probably shouldn't have to worry about it. We may wear all white again. I'm sure we'll have a white helmet. But for those of you guys that, haven't heard about it or picked up on it, Neil Brown's, I think, stated a couple times now on his radio show, West Virginia's getting a new uniform set next season. They're due to get a new set from Nike. So that's coming down the line. And, Neil Brown mentioned that on those away uniforms, they're going to add gold where it's just white and blue now. So if they add the gold, maybe I'll like the all white more. But definitely with the iteration of uniforms we have now, WV Fan 23, I think our record in the Stormtrooper uniforms is pretty bad. And I was worried when we announced that we were wearing those. Thought it was a bad omen. Turned out to be true. So wouldn't mind if we burned them. WVN23. Wouldn't mind either, man. Timothy Green, appreciate you, man, tuning in, chiming in as always. Indeed it was. Indeed it was. Hopefully they bounce back strong this weekend, though. Appreciate you guys. Continue to drop your thoughts in there. I'll touch on those one more time, but want to get to the depth chart projection here, using, of course, the snap count information, the injury update, and a little bit of guesswork. Here's my projected depth chart for the Mountaineers for this week against Cincinnati. Not too many changes, but there are a couple here. Leading it off here, quarterback remains the same. Obviously, GG is the number 1, Nico at the number 2. Running back, here's where you got a little bit of a change because I'm concerned about CJ Donaldson's status. I didn't remove him, left him on here, just put an or in between him and Jaheim White's name and moved Jaheim White's name to the front, and then Justin Johnson behind him at the 2 running back position. Moving on to the wide receivers. At the X spot, Hudson Clement, I think we'll get to start there, and we'll see him continue to get more and more snaps, probably outpace E.J. Horton in this game. I know E.J. Horton had more snaps than him, but like I said, I think they're trying to work Hudson back. I don't think he was 100%. I think he'll be closer to that in this one, and he'll have that start and roll down. Inside receiver, Devin Carter or Preston Fox there. I've got the or in between the names because they've both been playing, the most snaps at the receiver position, kind of going back and forth there, and they've both also been playing inside, and both those guys can play inside or outside, so West Virginia can use them interchangeably, use them at the same time. So, got them both on there with the or in between. And then, of course, Rodney Gower the third. He's been playing a lot recently. Snap count went down against Oklahoma, but still going to be in the mix. And then talked about Traylon Ray. He's going to be the number 1 guy on the outside on the other side. And then Jarrell Williams continues to get a handful of snaps in most games this season. Tight end position, still Cole Taylor, backed up by Traylon Davis. Offensive line, left tackle Wyatt Milam, backed up by Nick Malone. Left guard Thomas Remick, backed up by Brandon Yates. Center, still Zach Frazier, backup would be Brandon Yates. Right guard, Brandon Yates, backup Jaquay Hubbard. Then we get a change here at the right tackle spot because of the Doug Nestor status being up in the air. Still got the or in between him and Nick Malone there as the starter, and we'll get the freshman Johnny Williams on there at the second string spot. Flip it over to the defensive side. Sean Martin and Tommy Durajaye remain the guys there at the defensive end. Defensive tackle, I nearly, put Jalen Thornton finally as the second team guy there. If you've been following, the depth chart projections all season, you know that it's been these 3 guys with the or in between their names because they've been having similar snap counts all season. But I did move Jalen Thornton's name to the front of the list at least because I liked his performance the past couple of weeks. Looks like his role's increasing. Also had the most snap counts, but still keeping the or in between the names of Jalen Thornton, Hassani Redwood, and Day-Day Hawkins for the second teamers behind Steady Eddie there. Then at the nose tackle spot, Mike Lockhart remains the starter with Fatorma Mulba and Hammond Russell getting the backup minutes. The bandit position remains Jared Bartlett and Tyron Bradley. The linebacker spots, I've still got it listed as Mike and Will here, obviously, because that's kind of what West Virginia usually uses. But I thought an interesting thing that came out last week was since the injury to Trey Lathan, they're kind of playing with two Mikes, is something that Neil Brown mentioned, that they're using Lee Koba and Ben Cutter. Like, we knew that they were both Mikes position-wise, but instead of, Lee Koba playing the wheel, which is kind of what he did while Trey Lathan was playing, they're essentially using them both as Mike backers and have kind of changed up their scheme a little bit. Something that I thought that was interesting that Neil Brown mentioned last week. But Ben Cutter and Caden Bizer at one linebacker position, and then Lee Koba and Tyreek Austin Cave at the other. Spear, I mentioned Hershey McLaurin and Marcus Floyd, kind of co-starters there right now, with Raleigh Collins being your reserve guy. Cornerback, it will remain Beanie Bishop and Malachi Ruffin as the starters, with Jacoby Spells and Wilson Lamp as the potential backups. Free safety, still Aubrey Burks, with Marcus Floyd backing him up. Cat safety, Anthony Wilson, with either Malachi Ruffin or Marcus Floyd, able to get some of those reserve minutes. But look out for Josiah Jackson, maybe getting some reps at one of those two deep safety spots. Kicker still Michael Hayes. Punter still Oliver Straw. Kick returner Preston Fox. Punt returner Preston Fox. Long snapper Austin Brinkman. Holder, will either be Grayson Malashevich or Leighton Bechtel, depending on Malashevich's status. So there's a depth chart projection for this week for West Virginia as far as what a two deep could look like for the game against Cincinnati. I'll scroll back through it here before we wrap up the depth chart projection portion of the stream. All right, so there we are with the depth chart projection, and that's pretty much all I've got. I've got one more little tidbit that I want to touch on, and then other than that, I'm just going to catch up with your all's comments, and we'll get ready to wrap up this week's Snap Count stream. Appreciate you guys being in here, whether you're watching this live or on a playback. Like I said, before you head out, hit the thumbs up button and be sure and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Hold on one second, guys. I'm going to have to take this hoodie off. Got a little warm in here. All right, much better, much better. I've been needing to do that for like 20 minutes. I was trying to make it through the whole stream. Couldn't make it. My apologies, guys. A little hot in here. Should have cut the heat down before I started the stream, but didn't think that through. Appreciate you guys. Let me catch up on some of your all's comments. Timothy Green said, it seemed to me that Garrett had happy feet and did not want to step up in the pocket. Even when he's not pressured, I'm not blaming, the throws on him, but the loss on him, but it did not help things. Yeah, I agree. Had his worst game of the season for sure. And a lot of it, I think, was, little fundamental things like you're saying there, happy feet. Neil Brown's talked about him, stepping off to the left on some of his throws and, not following through correctly. And, I think some of that came back to bite him in this game. And Neil Brown said he made some of those mistakes against BYU. They didn't become costly. Unfortunately, they were costly in this one. And got to hope that he bounces back. But I think he will. He's a hard worker, and the kid's a winner. He's got that, intangible factor to him that he is a fighter. So hopefully we'll see a good performance from him on Saturday, Timothy. But I agree with you, man. Timothy, I know you came in here late, but that's what I led the show off with was the injury update. And all Neil Brown provided was that he didn't practice yesterday. Doug Nestor didn't practice yesterday. And so he's going to update the status Thursday night on his radio show. But what I said personally, just speculating, I don't have a good feeling about it. I don't think that he'll be able to go Saturday. Ankles are, iffy anyways they can, sometimes be lengthy. I'm hoping it's not, costly as it was last year for him when it kept him out for the remainder of the year. But I'd be surprised to see him go against Cincinnati. I think best case scenario, maybe getting him back for the finale against Baylor, but that's purely, speculation on my part, and fingers crossed. And I hope that I'm wrong and we see him come out and not only is he healthy and have a big game against Cincinnati. Yeah, I would have loved the traditional away uniform Saturday as well, John Kelly. I was surprised they didn't go with that. I was expecting them to either, wear what they wore in 82 or wear what they wore in the Fiesta Bowl. So I was really surprised they went with the all-white look. It was just, another wrong decision in a, comedy of errors for West Virginia this weekend, unfortunately. Just added to the list. But, hey, we got all that negativity out of the way. Now it's going to be all positive for these final two games, right? Let's hope so. Let's hope so. As am I, Silas. As am I. That gold's going to look good on the white. I'm interested to see what the new jerseys look like. Hopefully they don't, I don't think they need to make too many alterations to what they currently have. Throw some gold on the white. I'm expecting personally, I think that they're going to use the logo here with the state outline and the WVN that they've been using on the white helmets this year anyways. I think our new set will have either an alternate helmet that has that logo on it all the time, or we'll see that logo pop up on the jersey set, something like that. I think we're going to have that logo incorporated one way or the other. That might be one of the changes, though. We'll see what happens, but definitely. John Kelly says, need to get back on track tomorrow night with Jacksonville State, and shout out to the women's team as well. Yeah, shout out to the women's team being the 1 point of positivity for us right now. Had a rough weekend for other Mountaineer sports teams, but yeah, shout out to them. Looking good, and I like Coach Kellogg. Think he's going to be a bright spot as well for them. So we'll see what happens there. Men's soccer team got a 5 seed in the NCAA tournament. I saw that as well, but definitely hope the basketball team bounces back tomorrow against Jacksonville State. We're going to try and be live here for a post-game show. That's my plan tomorrow night if all goes according to plan. Do a basketball post-game show tomorrow night, and then we're going to release a CRW Hoops pod before the next basketball game as well. So, yeah, hopefully be a big thing for West Virginia to get back on the winning side of things there. Hopefully right the ship. Not only good for the basketball team, but I think it'd be good for the fan base right now. We could use a win, and hopefully, like I said, get all the negativity out of the way for the football team, but hopefully in general, this negativity is out of the way, and we'll get a win for the basketball team tomorrow and a win against Cincinnati on Saturday. That's what I'd like to see. After tomorrow, 6 games till we get Creasy back. Good stuff. We need it. We need it big time, and hopefully positive news on the battle waiver as well. Got fingers crossed. WFan23 said he'd love to see us wear gold, gray, gold on Saturday. We've never won that combo, and I think they would look good. Oh, that sounds spicy to me. I like that. I love the gold. It's my favorite. Mix in the gray. I love the gray jerseys. I think they're probably the most underrated jersey we have because I love the look of the numbers on the gray jerseys because you get the blue with the gold outline, which is what the white jersey should have, is the blue number with the gold outline. But you get that on the grays, and it looks really good. So I wouldn't mind to see that combo, WFan23. That'd be awesome. I'm hoping to see some gold on there somewhere, whether it's pants, helmet, jersey, whatever. Definitely hoping for it. We'll be reporting on it, though, Thursday night here on the live stream, our prediction stream. If you're watching this on a playback, didn't get a chance to chat with us live this time, come chat with us live Thursday night, where we'll get your all's predictions for the game against Cincinnati and chat with you guys as that game, approaches. And, of course, talk a little Jersey talk as West Virginia will have their uniform unveiled that night, and we'll discuss it and how we feel about it. And hopefully there is some of that gold incorporated on it. But appreciate you guys tuning in and chiming in here. One last thing I want to share, kind of unrelated to WVU, but definitely if you're a Morgantown resident or anything like that. Well, before I get to that, let me share this in regards to the Cincinnati game. I'm sure everyone probably seen it already, but obviously this coming Saturday's game time has been announced. 2:30 ESPN Plus is this game against Cincinnati. But the last thing that I wanted to wrap up with, teased it a little bit earlier, and that is in Morgantown this weekend, actually coming up on Friday night. I mentioned I'll be in Morgantown with the wife, and the reason that I'll be there is she's going to actually be performing at the Encore on November 17th, Friday night, from 6 to 10 p.m. You see the list of artists there. Jada Madison, that's my wife there. She's going to be performing there, and I'll be up there with her. So if you're in Morgantown, encourage you, come out to the Encore on Friday night, see her perform, see all these other great artists perform. I know her friend Grace Campbell performed actually in the blue lot ahead of the Texas Tech game, I believe it was. So you may have seen her perform before, but come out, check out the wife perform. And then also I'm going to be there, and I'm going to have some Country Roads webcast stickers, buttons. So if you are there, come see me. If you see me there, I'll give you a free Country Roads webcast sticker, button, maybe even both, whatever you like. I've got a few different logo iterations. We got a few different logo variations. I'll have, each one of those in a sticker and a button. Come get you one of those if you see me, and come out and hear some great music as well. My wife and these other artists are really talented. So come out, check that out this Friday night, and maybe I'll get to see some of you guys. And I'm going to try and maybe get my wife to come on to the prediction stream Thursday night and try and plug it a little bit more further as well. But don't know if I'll be able to get her to do that enough, twist her arm enough to do that. But if not, I'll try and remind you guys on that stream as well. But I wanted to mention here on this one also and try and give plenty of opportunities to plug that. So, yeah, if you're in Morgantown, come out to the Encore Friday night, ahead of game day. Some people get up there early. If you are there, come out to the Encore from 6 to 10 on Friday night and see some good music acts ahead of game day. So wanted to share that here before we close up shop here for sure. But appreciate you guys, man, tuning in here and chiming in. Great as always. Always enjoy chatting with you guys and look forward to doing it again. Appreciate that, John. Always appreciate you, man, and appreciate all the other great Mountaineer fans in here as well that have tuned in and chimed in. And appreciate you whether you watched it live or if you're tuning on a playback. Hit the thumbs up button before you leave. Subscribe to us if you haven't already. Check us out on social media. We're on X at WVU Country Roads Webcast on Facebook and Instagram. Check us out on all podcast platforms where we release 2 long-form podcast episodes a week at least during football season, and sometimes even more with basketball season going on right now. Have another one releasing here in the next couple of days where we'll preview the upcoming game against Cincinnati, provide our preview and predictions for that one, as well as the other Big 12 games happening this week. We'll predict those as well, so you'll get to hear our predictions and our thoughts for the game, and then we'll come back on Thursday night this week instead of Friday, since I'll be up there in Morgantown for that show Friday. We're doing the projection stream on Thursday night. Stay tuned to our social media to find out exactly what time, but you can come share your thoughts on the game and share your predictions with us, and we'll chat with you guys again this coming Thursday. But looking forward to talking about the Cincinnati game. Glad to, get this snap count stream out of the way, not only because I enjoy chatting with you guys, but also because now we can kind of put the Oklahoma game behind us officially. It's kind of the last piece of coverage I've got to do on it, and now I can focus on Cincinnati and get to some more positive things, which I think we all need right now, and hopefully it's a positive result, and we're hoping for an 8-win season here at the CRW, and we know all of you all are also. Looking forward to it, and hopefully you tune into the rest of our content coming out this week. Tune in for plenty of it coming on the Mountaineer Sports side. We'll have the basketball post-game show tomorrow night, CRW Hoops podcast coming soon, and like I said, Cincinnati preview releasing midweek, and then come back chat with us Thursday night. Appreciate you guys as always. I'm Jordan Cruz, and until next time, let's go Mountaineers.